Have you ever heard someone say they absolutely love something, but kind of deeply resent the boundaries it creates? Well, this profound paradox right here perfectly captures the essence of India's first and only female prime minister, Indira Gandhi. She was a leader who cherished Indian constitutional democracy, yet openly, almost fundamentally disliked the restrictions that very democracy imposed on her.
Welcome to today's Explainer. We are objectively unpacking the meteoric rise, the massive controversies, and the incredibly bold decisions of one of history's most fiercely debated leaders. We're going to see exactly how a politician, once entirely dismissed by her own party, managed to outmaneuver her rivals and completely redefine the largest democracy on Earth.
Here's our roadmap for today's deep dive. Section 1, the ultimate political paradox. Section 2, outmaneuvering the Congress syndicate. Section 3, populist policies and popularity. Section 4, abolishing the privy purse. Section 5, navigating the Bangladesh conflict. And finally, Section 6, the legacy of boldness. Let's get right into it. Section 1, the ultimate political paradox, democracy versus control. Okay, so to truly understand her, we have to start with this incredible duality. On the one hand, you have a leader who strongly championed her nation's core institutions and the concept of a free press. But on the other hand, in practice, she fundamentally bristled against constitutional restrictions and the very freedoms she claimed to support. Understanding Indira Gandhi really requires us to accept that her paradoxical leadership style operated entirely in tension with the rigid political constraints of her time. It's like a giant puzzle. Section 2, outmaneuvering the Congress syndicate, the silent doll. Picture this. It's January 1966, right after the sudden death of Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri. The political kingmakers of the time fundamentally miscalculated her strength. The Congress syndicate, led by a man named Kamaraj, essentially expected a gungi guriya, which translates to a silent doll. They backed her, fully assuming she'd just be a weak puppet who would obediently rely on them to run the country. But wow, the reality was a total shock to the system. When the syndicate eventually expelled her from the party, she didn't just quietly step down. No way. She simply formed a new party, drew this massive, overwhelming grassroots support, and began her transformation from a so-called silent doll right into a beloved champion of the voters. Section 3, populist policies and popularity, economic masterstrokes. Now let's fast forward a bit to July 19th, 1969. Gandhi makes this incredibly courageous policy decision to nationalize 14 private banks. To understand exactly why she did this, and why the public absolutely loved it, you just have to consider this staggering figure, 361. Between 1947 and 1955, 361 banks failed across the country. That is an average of 40 banks collapsing every single year. And when they failed, common depositors lost absolutely everything, because there were zero guarantees in place. Just looking at the financial system back then, there is this gross imbalance. In 1950, a meager 2.3% of bank loans went to agriculture and farmers. Think about that. Meanwhile, a massive 97.7% chunk went almost entirely to large industries and corporate businesses. Private commercial banks were catering straight to the elites and pretty much completely ignoring the agricultural sector, which, by the way, made up the vast majority of the country. So taking over those banks basically flipped the script. It ended that corporate control, and it massively expanded rural branches from just over 1,800 to more than 33,000. It ensured loans finally actually reached farmers and small-scale entrepreneurs. Now, this wasn't just economics, right? It was a ruthless political masterstroke. By taking control of the financial system, she effectively cut off the funding of her political opposition based in Mumbai, while simultaneously cementing her status as an absolute hero to the rural majority. Section 4. Abolition the privy purse, the constitutional fight. Riding high on that banking victory, Gandhi set her sights on another monumental policy. The privy purse was essentially a guaranteed pension promised to the rulers of princely states who had joined India after independence. Now, financially speaking, it was just a tiny, tiny fraction of the national budget, but symbolically, striking it down was a spectacularly popular move. She framed the abolition as this totally necessary step against societal inequality, and this maximized the political consequences, establishing her as the ultimate fighter for the common person.
This legislative battle is fascinating because it illustrates exactly how relentless she was. Because this was a constitutional provision, she needed a formal amendment. It went to Parliament, and get this, it failed by literally one single vote. Why? Amusingly enough, because an opposition politician had indigestion and was stuck in the washroom during the vote. But she doesn't give up. She bypasses Parliament entirely with a presidential order to strip the kings of their status. Then, the Supreme Court strikes that down as unconstitutional. So what does she do? She declares the rich are trying to stop her, dissolves the Lok Sabha, calls a fresh election with the iconic slogan Garibi Hatao, which means remove poverty, wins a massive mandate in 1971, and finally passes the bill. She simply would not be stopped. It proved her absolute dominance over Indian politics.
Section 5. Navigating the Bangladesh Conflict, a Geopolitical Crisis. Now, just as her domestic grip is tightening, this unprecedented international crisis erupts right next door. In March 1971, West Pakistan's army began brutally attacking the local population in East Pakistan, who were demanding a separate country called Bangladesh. A staggering 90 lakh refugees flooded into India. She knew American pressure at the UN would be intense if India intervened, so she expertly managed the international pressure by signing a strategic treaty of peace, friendship, and cooperation with the Soviet Union in August. When the war officially started on December 3rd, America supported Pakistan. But she had the geopolitical backing she needed, with the USSR standing by India and effectively blocking any hostile UN resolutions. Her tactical execution of this war was just phenomenal. She strategically cut off all supplies to Pakistani ships in the Indian Ocean, leaving their army completely surrounded and facing massive shortages. And the result? 93,000 Zeds. Within just 14 days, an army of 93,000 soldiers surrendered. It was a historic, unmatched military victory. And it firmly established her nation's standing in what was a completely male-dominated geopolitical world. Section 6. The Legacy of Boldness. Final Verdict. So, what does this all mean? How do we reconcile these two entirely different realities? On the one hand, you have a leader who made decisions that tragically paralyzed her own country for a long period during the emergency. But on the other hand, she showed this unmatched integrity and courage to take deeply bold decisions when her back was against the wall, fundamentally reshaping the region's geography and India's banking systems for the poor. Understanding Indira Gandhi requires holding two contrasting truths at once. It proves that true power, and honestly history itself, is a complex, unresolved paradox. Thanks for joining me today, and keep questioning the history you think you know.